We are here and we want to thank you for the time that you take to come and join us when we are discussing very pertinent issues around entrepreneurship and sharing information, contacts that possibly can build a stronger ecosystem around entrepreneurship. That's our daily passion at the E4Impact Foundation as we aim to build impact entrepreneurs. Thank you once again for joining us, Prof. Rana, this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we thank you for joining us. And once again, we carry on discussing the negotiation, how to build more skills and tools and knowledge around doing better negotiation. But before we go further, for those who are joining us maybe for the first time and are wondering who is E4Impact, I just want to share some highlights of what we are up to as E4Impact so that you are able to join the family and be able to enjoy the programs that we offer at the E4Impact Foundation. So let me share my screen and then I just share. We have new upcoming programs that are we are coming up in our partner universities. But the most exciting news for me to announce today, I think the last webinar we were asking for you to vote for us. We had been nominated for the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program of the Year, and we're happy to announce here that we managed to scoop that award. So we just want to thank everyone who comes on this program, everyone who's part of our programs, to thank you for coming through and be part of the story at E4Impact Foundation. So we're very excited about that. So I'll just share my screen just to briefly alert you of our programs, where you will find us, and who to talk to when you get there. Like I said, we are training impact entrepreneurs across Africa, and we are passionate about creating a generation of entrepreneurs that are job creators, a generation of entrepreneurs that are conscious of contributing to the economy of their countries, to positively impact the social structures of their communities, and also to positively impact the environment. We work through an alliance of universities with a footprint of 18 universities in Africa that we're working with, in North Africa, South Africa, West and East Africa. And we have developed partnerships and market relations with corporates in those countries, and countries especially in Europe, corporates in Europe that are able to create platforms for entrepreneurs to access finance, to access markets, and to grow expertise and knowledge in their businesses. We're very honored to announce that the advantages of joining the E4Impact family, like I said, through our networks with our alliance, the corporates, the organizations that we work with who are equally passionate, we are creating platforms for access to investment, and we're creating platforms where our alumni and our existing students actually manage to grow their client base and be able to start new businesses. For those who are at idea stage, those who are at startup stage and growth stage are able to scale their businesses through access to finance and increase their turnover through these strategic partnerships that we've built through our MBA program and our certificate programs that you'll find in our entrepreneurship centers. We have accelerators in our services in the entrepreneurship centers that we run. So upcoming programs are in Tunisia, Kenya. We are actually enrolling right now for 2023. So most of the programs here have started, but if you are interested in joining us for 2023, please go to the chat box in this, if you are in this webinar, and you can be able to get the contacts. But in Tunisia, in Kenya, in Sudan, we are working with Université Centrale de Tunis, Tangaza University, University of Medical Science and Technology. We are with University of Rwanda in Rwanda, Catholic University of Zimbabwe, and St. Thomas University in Mozambique. So please contact us on our Facebook page, social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and we are constantly on our website. We're constantly posting the different programs with our alliance universities and in our accelerators in the entrepreneurship centers. So please feel free to contact us, and even in the chat box today. Thank you. So today we want to talk about an exciting topic. And the question that we want to ask is, what makes international negotiation complex? And what is the role of culture in international negotiation? And I think the first webinar we did, Prof, is we did cover culture in great detail, and you brought out different relationships, subordinate to employee. You brought out collective individual and collective communities, and you brought out the different aspects of applying. We talked about high and low power distance, and we covered different elements of tolerance of uncertainty and high and low tolerance of uncertainty. And we discussed different communities in different contexts and how they affect negotiation. And then we covered more about the environment of negotiation where in the other webinars. But here we want to talk about what the international aspect and what makes it complex. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just share just a few slides just to show what makes some negotiations complex. As you've seen in the previous webinars, when you have two people negotiating, following a little bit the Harvard negotiation theory, you have their interests, you have to understand the interests of the other party, you have to identify the zone of possible agreement, and you have to determine possible best alternatives to a negotiated agreement. What happens if a negotiation doesn't end in an agreement? Do I have alternatives or not? The problem with complex negotiations is that they usually involve much more players. Now, theory is very difficult to be developed because international negotiations tend to be complex. Think of mergers, acquisitions at international level, but think of negotiating with a new supplier, with a new client. And what is the complexity? The complexity is provided by four main elements. First is there are many players at the table. It's not only supplier-seller, but there are other players, maybe behind the scenes, but they are there. They're usually multi-issue because beyond the usual issues that are at stake in conventional negotiations, we have many more because we have more parties at the table. They are dynamic. They change very rapidly, continuously. And they are non-linear. Non-linear means that they are not easy to predict. Little small changes can create great consequences. There is another reason for that, is that as you've heard recently, there is this advocacy for a stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism, especially in the US, is about not thinking only about the shareholders, but all the stakeholders that are involved. This is maybe more European, is also more African, but it's not really American. So because now the negotiations are moving to take into account all the stakeholders at the table, maybe they're becoming even more complex. Now, why negotiations are complex when there are many players? I just made a chart to represent how the degrees of freedom of the negotiation system accelerate with the number of players. With two players, we only have 2 degrees of freedom, so they're easy to predict. With 3 players, they become 6. With 4 players, we have 24 degrees of player. Here I made some, I underlined the 2 M&A negotiations that happened in the last decade. One is Fiat Chrysler FCA, the other one is Tata, between Tata and Ford for Jaguar Land Rover, where you had 4 players that were the 2 main players plus the unions and the government. In the Fiat Chrysler case was the Obama government plus the American unions. In the Tata Ford, they were the British government and the local unions, the UK unions. When you have 5 players, then becomes even more. For example, in Daimler Chrysler, you also had a very strong shareholder that was involved. Gilly Ford, you had more than one government involved. 6 players is Renault-Nissan between the French government and the Japanese government, where you had the unions, the governments from both the countries involved. And the last one is FCA Renault, that is a negotiation that did not end with an agreement, where besides the unions, the governments of each country, you also had, for example, Nissan, that is one of the key partners of Renault, involved. So as you see, it's exponential. It's exponential. And the more players are involved, the more the negotiation gets complex, and the degrees of freedom represent the complexity of the negotiation. So how do we manage that? One way is to adopt a framework that has been used to understand and analyze international political negotiations, and also the big environmental negotiations. And it's based on the concept of turning point. Turning point are those critical moments that move the negotiation process towards or away from an agreement. You know, in every negotiation, there are 3-4 key crucial moments that determine the final outcome, and these are called turning points. So this framework utilizes turning points, but most important, tries to identify the precipitants that are the events, the actions, and the behaviors that generate turning point. So think of a past negotiation, we can identify the turning points, and going back in time, we also determine the precipitant that triggered the turning point. But that can also be used with future negotiations to shape the negotiation process, because if we know that usually turning points that happen are the ones that we would like them to have, we can trigger them with specific precipitants that are actions or behaviors. For example, being more integrative during the negotiation process. For example, building trust with the other party. The outcome of most research on complex negotiation highlights 4 factors. The first one is building coalitions. Because there are many players, you have to build coalitions. You have to find other players that have a common interest with you and build coalitions. The second key point is that complex negotiations require usually a trust-based relationship between the CEOs. You have seen, for the ones that have attended the previous seminars, that win-win or integrative negotiations are fundamental, and they are usually based on trust. So having trust-based relationships are important. The third is, once we have a target, especially for example in M&As, cross-company teams, it means people from the 2 companies working together, they can highlight and explore potential synergies. This is very important because the companies start working together before the deal is closed. It's very, very important because they build trust. And the fourth is very interesting. Even in the presence of power asymmetries, let's imagine a larger acquirer buying a smaller target, there has to be equality provisions in the agreement. Why is that? Because in every M&A, for example, international M&A, you need both the parties to create the synergies. One is not enough. Even if I'm larger, I can't make the synergies alone. So it's very important. If the 2 companies have more or less the same size, the agreement has to be based on the equality principle, 100%. Same numbers of board of directors, same number of managers, governance, and everything. But even in the presence of power asymmetry, we have to be sure that equality provisions are present in the contract. This is one of the key factors that can forecast the durability of a merger, international merger acquisition, the equality principle. It's very interesting. So this is more or less what you can find on complex negotiations. It changes a little bit. You still have to work on the interest. You still have to work on the different alternatives, but these are 4 critical factors that happen. Beta, if we have any question, we can start discussing together.
All right. So I think you've mentioned the different aspects or the 4 issues that affect and that bring about the complexity. And the first question maybe that we can answer is, how do you remain neutral in the negotiation? I mean, you talked about synergies, creating a synergy, equity, and it doesn't matter how large or how more powerful you are than your other party, but there has to be a synergy. And in that, how do you remain neutral and actually achieve that synergy?
If by neutrality you mean rational, that is not easy. I think negotiation is finding the right balance in every moment between your objective and the relationship we have with the other party. You can't, there are a lot of movies around about very strong negotiators like Donald Trump thinks he is, that go there and impose their will. In reality, it's a bit different. You have to be very rational, always keep in mind your objective, but at the same time, you have to have the ability to build a trust-based relationship. And this is not easy at all. So you have to build trust-based relationship. At the same time, you don't have to take anything personally. It's one of the key factors and the key skills you have to learn to be a great negotiator. Be rational in every moment. It's very, very important. But at the same time, build the relationships. It's not easy if you think of it. You can't be an artificial intelligence.
Yes, it's not easy, like you're saying. And also, if you so what skill or what approach can you take, let's say, if you know that your priorities are in direct contrast and not aligned, but somehow your goal is towards the same, we are trying to achieve the same goals, but your priorities are not aligned.
Sometimes having priorities that are not aligned can even be an advantage. Why? Because if their priorities of the other party are not your priorities, you can yell on them, you can concede on them, and at the same time work on your priorities. So go towards their priorities with your company and make them come towards you. So sometimes, even if the interests are not completely aligned, the priorities are not completely aligned, the negotiation can be still successful. But you have to be very creative. You have to think of the negotiation outside, a little bit outside of the box. So creativity is something that is very important. Because if you think only about, for example, price, or you are stuck with a fixed bias, then it becomes very hard. But most of the times, if you have incongruent and not aligned priorities, it can be even an advantage if you find the right solution. But you have to be creative, think out of the box.
Think out of the box. All right. I think let's see if we have any more questions. I don't know if you have any more slides to share.
No, I was thinking about, do you remember the first time we spoke about culture and the impact of culture? I think even in the next webinars it was mentioned. And one thing that is interesting in complex international negotiation, culture has a smaller effect because usually the people that are involved in negotiations are more experienced.
Yes.
So they find that common ground that we spoke about the first time. Culture becomes very important when you have to integrate and you have to start working together, really. After the deal is closed, then culture becomes an issue because you have people from different countries involved in working together. Then culture is very important. So I'm not underestimating the role of culture, but it is interesting to see that during the negotiations it doesn't affect much, even especially if the negotiators are very experienced. And another aspect of complex negotiation is you should be able to map out the different stakeholders, the different players at the table. If you can map them out and understand, identify their different interests, then you can build a coalition. For example, often, if I am an acquirer and I want to buy a target in another country, building a coalition with the local unions is fundamental. Otherwise, they can have a veto power and they can in some way be an obstacle towards the agreement. Finding a coalition with local governments, local officials becomes very, very important. So you don't negotiate with the target right away. You start building your coalitions. This is very important. understanding their interests, starting talking to them. So you bring them on your side. And this is very, very important. And usually hostile takeovers in complex business negotiations don't work, because on the long term, they end up in failure.
They end up in failure. Right. So you've talked about stakeholder mapping, and if you look at and basically maybe you are saying the stakeholder that holds the most power and influence. Where would you advise I have that stakeholder, especially if we're having an international scenario? I mean, is it better in another country or in my core country, or how do I handle the complexities of having the stakeholder, or the participant stakeholder, and the four, the matrix ways? Where do I best put the one with power and influence?
Now, yeah, you got it. Now, that requires understanding the decision-making process. Sometimes we even speak maybe with the CEO, with the founder of a company, but maybe he or she is not the real decision maker. So there are other things. For example, I work a lot here, we're talking about entrepreneurship. I work a lot with founders that are acquired by investing companies. And sometimes the founders are not the real decision makers. They are their wives, their husbands. Yeah, sometimes it happens because, maybe they want to push for more money and the others won't. So it's very important to understand who is behind the scenes, because maybe they are the real key players at the negotiation table.
The beneficiaries.
Maybe the beneficiaries, yes.
Yeah, they're the direct beneficiaries.
In large M&As, think of the unions. The unions, even in countries where the union doesn't have a big representation, they still can have a big voice. The local workers, it's very, very important. Speaking at all levels and going there saying, look, we are here to work together, and it can be beneficial for both sides. I think having a win-win approach, an integrative approach, as you've seen in the previous webinars, is very, very important.
Very, very important. And so maybe we can get into the team that I have to build to be able to carry out. I mean, what step-by-step approach can you give an entrepreneur that is maybe at growth or scaling stage, and they have an opportunity to negotiate it in an international level? What can I do to strengthen the team that will present?
I think first of all is building a good network. It means it can be chambers of commerce, it can be other entrepreneurs that have done the same and have entered the same countries. It can be the alumni of E4Impact. Building a network is very, very important. Especially working with startups and scale-ups. I'm learning day by day that they have to have a network, even in different environments, in different contexts. So the first thing I will do is, even before you start looking at going international, look around, travel a little bit, see other companies that do more or less what you do, and build a network. Is very, very important. There is nothing like that that can help you more than that, because they always give you a lot of advice. From our side, it's important always to have on our team somebody that has an international experience, for sure. If you can find somebody that has been living abroad, has been studying abroad, is quite comfortable negotiating and communicating in different languages, in different countries, this can be very, very positive. Yeah, very, very, very important. So once you grow, always look for somebody that has this international perspective, I would say.
Great. So I think what I always say to people, sometimes participating in conferences, like you're saying, and yes, is a quick way to immediately expose yourself to opportunities and expose yourself to people who have the relevant experience that you're looking for. So a question here is saying, this is maybe in capacity development projects where you're working with donors. How do I negotiate with donors for maybe for administrative costs. So I'm thinking maybe to get a position where their administrative costs are fully covered. So
I think when you negotiate and you're negotiating with donors, especially, they usually have a lot of experience, maybe, and maybe more than most of us. My advice is always to be very, very transparent, very forthcoming, because they know more or less our situation. So if you have things to share, costs to share, information to share, why not? For sure, something will not be shared, but on the cost side, why not? You just be upfront, just tell them exactly why and what, but especially the why. Explain them, have a good explanation for everything you request, and has to be something you can motivate and justify. This is very important. If you can justify it, makes sense. Otherwise, it's very hard.
So if you can justify and you can prove the purpose and the why, you will get a better negotiating platform.
For sure.
So, right. I think we've covered this one. How can someone have effective negotiation skills? So maybe so build the skills to be effective. And I think you've covered some of that.
We can work on that a little bit, Marta. I think one of the things we don't do much in negotiation is building trust with other party. Why? Because building trust requires us to be vulnerable for a certain amount of time. But there is always somebody who has to do the first step. So it goes again with the relationship. I think in one of the slides that has been shown in the previous seminars, there was something that is very interesting. That was about preparation. I think preparation is fundamental.
Yes.
But there is usually people prepare. When they prepare, they only look at their side. They don't look at the other side. And this is something that I already stated in our previous webinar. Always take into consideration the interests, the alternatives of the other side. This is very, very important. Be prepared. You can always improvise in a negotiation, but the more you're prepared, the more the negotiation moves towards your goal. Second is,
and when you say prepared, what are we referring to exactly? What like 3 things that you can say?
I always try to hypothesize the priority of their interests. What is most important for them, and then I can always change the ranking during the negotiations with the new information that comes. Second, I always try to hypothesize if they have an alternative and which can be. Then during the negotiation, again, I can change that. Third is I always, in some way, forecast how the negotiation will evolve, how it will start, what will happen. And in some way, I know in advance what's going to happen. You know, there are a lot of sport runners, sport people. I think of Kip Coach, the marathon runner. He envisions his race before doing it. And it's more or less also for negotiators. You have to know more or less what's going to happen. I'm not saying that you will be prepared for everything, but at least you have more or less an idea what's going to happen. This is very, very important. And know who's going to sit at the other side of the table. Know the person. So search for them on Google, on LinkedIn, gather more information you can, and try to portray them in some way. So you know which is the best strategy and tactic to approach them. Very, very important.
Okay. So a question coming in, is there a tool that you can learn or that you can use to manage all the different moving parts at such a level? You've talked about many players, you've talked about different aspects and levels that you're dealing at. Is there a specific tool that maybe you can share that someone can use to manage all the...
I usually work with something like a notebook that is always there, where I have all the information I gathered. So I don't mind sometimes asking for a timeout, saying, look, can we have a 5 minutes timeout just to look at my notes, going back, going forward, because new information comes and the strategy changes. So it's very important sometimes to create your space during the negotiation so that you can add the new information to the notes you have and to the preparation you made. This is very, very important. It's very strategic. Think of chess, more or less. In chess, you don't reply to the other party's move right away. You wait, you think of it. And negotiation is not very different. Sometimes you just take time, you ask for a timeout and you go for that. Another thing is gather all the information, have something like a dashboard where you have all the information inside. Can be the different players, can be their interests, can be their alternatives. That has to be always available to you. Can be a small laptop in the tablet, can be a colleague of yours that has gathered information, can provide it to you immediately. And sometimes I consult the negotiations doing exactly that. When there are high-stake negotiations, I go there and I know by heart exactly the interests and the alternatives of different players and what they want. And if something changes, a new information comes, I just put it in the algorithm. That is not a real algorithm, but it's still something that you can use. Yes. It's like a dashboard. Yeah. Think of all the KPIs of an entrepreneur. And it's the same also in negotiation.
The deliverables.
Yes,
and
exactly.
The inputs, and then you prioritize how you're going to negotiate for those.
Exactly.
Right. I guess that can be followed up by the question is there an institute or a college that you can recommend for training in negotiation skills?
Now, if you think nowadays with MBAs, there is always a negotiation class. But most importantly, I think with Coursera and the likes, you can enroll to a class, and usually you have pretty good professors, and you can learn the basics of negotiation. And once you get the basics, it's about experience and feedback and analysis. So yeah, you can always go to Harvard and spend a lot of money there. But I think you can have something very similar with Coursera or something similar, or even E4Impact has in the MBAs a negotiation class. So it's they're available on the web.
All right. So if you could put up, sorry, if I could take you back to put up your first slide with the different aspects that affect the complexity of.
Let me go back here.
Yes. So I think the question, okay, before we go to that one, is to explain the nonlinear. What do you, if you could just go over the nonlinear?
Now, the nonlinear is what's happening today in the world. Small events can trigger very large consequences. We always think about if an event that happens is small, the consequences will be small, but sometimes very small things can trigger very large consequences. Think of the inflation today that is around the world. It's mainly due not by the war, not anymore by the pandemic. It's because of the demand and the supply situation that was forced after the pandemic. So it is sometimes there are things that happen that you can't forecast before, that you can't envision, and you have to be ready for them. So nonlinear systems are the ones where the outcome of an input can be much larger of the input itself. It doesn't have to be linear, okay? So our brain works with linearity, but the world is non-linear. It's much more complex. It can be exponential. Think of the COVID. When you have cases of COVID, the waves, they usually go in an exponential way, not in a linear way. But our brain works in a linear way. The world is all exponential and non-linear today. This is the difficulty we find, and brings more complexity.
It brings more complexity. Exactly. You're very right. So a question, if at this level of international negotiation, and we do know that there are different types of negotiations, what type would you advise? That's the question.
You mean as an approach of negotiation?
Yes, as an approach.
I would always recommend an integrative negotiation, trying to fulfill also the priorities of the other party besides ours. So go what is called win-win. I really don't like the term win-win, but it represents well what I mean. Even if you go very competitive in a negotiation, you can win on the short term, but you lose on the long term. So it doesn't work very well. If you have a long-term perspective, always try to build a relationship, try to understand the needs and the interests of the other sides, and try to find a solution that includes them. It's very, very important, very, very important. And people know when you really look towards them and for them.
Okay, okay. I think we have one more question that I'd like to ask, and that is, how to save a negotiation that has gone bust, you know, at an international level? Is there any specific, because of that element of the many players? I mean, what advice can you give when you?
I can say that most of the M&As that the M&A negotiation that failed at international level, they failed either because they didn't find the right synergies, so it was not the right target, but mostly because of the unions. What does it mean? That the potential buyer didn't build a coalition with the unions, didn't include the unions in the negotiation. Even in countries where the unions are not so powerful, it's amazing.
That's what I was about to ask. In some countries, the unions are not that powerful.
But it is incredible how they can make a lot of noise, and then the governments can come in because of the unions, and then they can just bust the negotiations. For example, if you go in France and you try to acquire a company in France, you have to have the unions on board because they're very powerful there. But even in Italy, where I'm speaking from, the unions are not very important, but they can, it's not they can help a negotiation, but they can put a veto on negotiation. So even if they're not very, very powerful. So, and sometimes we forget one of the key stakeholders. It can be a silent shareholder or somebody like that, but the unions are always there. Another thing that can happen, especially in larger organizations, in larger mergers, is are elections. Because elections, because usually mergers involve people. In elections periods, it's always advisable not to go for your target. If the target is in a country that is under election period, don't go there. Don't go there. Wait for the elections to happen or do it before the elections. Very, very important. Elections are always something, they create something like a non-linear environment.
Yeah,
political elections.
And a bit difficult to plan for, and because you don't understand, you might not have control over the direction that they take and the impact that they will have.
For sure, and you can become the target of one of the different parties involved in the election. So you don't want that. So stay away.
Stay away. So maybe our last question is a question that is applied to every aspect of business post-COVID. I mean, what have we learned? Well, I don't know if we're post-COVID, but what have we learned from the experience of COVID, and has that had any significant impact on how we carry out negotiations at an international level, considering that?
I really think yes, because I think now technology can help us to build a relationship with the other party. To have, I think in the very important phases of a negotiation, you have to be face-to-face.
Yes.
But during transition period, when you're gathering information, you're building some kind of trust, having Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, help a lot. While usually before the pandemic, there will be only phone calls or maybe emails. Now we can just, press a button, see each other, half an hour, maybe gather some information, or if there are big issues at the table, maybe we can smooth them before the face-to-face encounter. So I think post-pandemic, we are learning to use technology in a wiser way. It doesn't mean technology is more important than face-to-face meetings. They can go along. They can go along much more than what they did before. Before we didn't use technology as effectively as we do today.
And I feel technology has also enabled access to certain individuals that you would not have had access to physically, even if you travel to a specific place, seeing these people, but them coming onto Zoom or any other platform is much faster and easier to access them. So it has allowed availability and access to influential or powerful people that maybe you would not have had access to.
And we get back to the concept of building your ecosystem, your network,
Yes.
And maybe you can do it much more today. Yes, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know if we have any more questions in the chat room. Right. Wambi wants a more satisfying answer on the training skills about negotiation. You mentioned Harvard. Do you think journalists who are in the center of conflicting parties need negotiation skills training?
Now, Michael, I was looking at your question now. Now, Harvard is, you know, when you the number one book on negotiation is Getting to Yes by Fisher and Urey, that are two professors from Harvard. Another institution that has a very strong negotiation school is Wharton in Pennsylvania, again. But negotiation skills now have become much wider than what they were before. And I think negotiation is built around three key concepts. One is understand your interests and your priorities and understand the interests of the other side. Understand your alternatives and the alternatives of the other side. And third is try to find options to enlarge the cake, to make the negotiation more integrative. So build a relationship, but also think out of the box. These are three key concepts that if you learn them and if you practice them, you become a good negotiator. And this is what Harvard says, this is what Wharton says, but this is also what the London Business School says. A lot of institutions now follow the same trend. It's also true that you can't be integrative with everybody. You always find very competitive buyers if you're selling solutions, for example. So you have to be ready for them. So don't expect everybody to be integrative, because people are not integrative by themselves. They don't build trust in relationships. So this is why I said go on Coursera and look at negotiation classes. They are provided by leading institutions around the world, and they work very well, very well. And then if you need to go face-to-face in a training class, you will find them. Regarding journalists, they are the center of their, you know, journalists always, sometimes they're very neutral, but sometimes they really pick a side. Depends on their role. If they have to stay neutral, yes, I agree with you. But sometimes they just have to pick a side and they go with that side. So I don't know, for journalism, more than negotiating is managing conflict. That is very important. This is for sure. This is for sure.
Or maybe if they don't pick the sides, they support the most affected party or the beneficiaries who are affected or positively or negatively by the issue.
For sure.
And they represent that, which is actually safer than picking a side.
I think as a journalist, you always have to provide the facts.
Facts, yes.
Not your opinions. This is the main thing about the journalist. But then there are a lot of journalists who also provide opinions, but they have to state it. They have to say, this is my opinion. It's not reality. And this is very important.
No, thank you very much. So I think we don't have any more questions and we've exhausted our questions. And I think what I've appreciated is preparation, do your due diligence, do your investigations, understand the environment that needs to be created for mutual benefit and a win-win situation, and practice. I think through experience and applying all the tools that we've shared, you learn more by applying and practicing and deliberately building that team that is experienced enough to handle the negotiations. And at this level, you mentioned finding people who are exposed and who are networked, and yourself, exposing yourself to networks that are relevant to build that skill. Professor Rana, we want to thank you for this series. It's been very interesting, and I know that a lot of people have learned a lot. Let me just check one more time. I think Michael is back and he's saying, but journalists can break negotiation. Yes, very true, very true.
Yeah.
Journalists can influence a negotiation, especially if the information they are sharing has...
No, Michael, I'll provide you with an example. During the negotiations between FCA and Renault, there was a leaking of the agreement by the Financial Times. But because the unions and the French government were not involved, were not informed of the negotiations, they put something like a veto power on the negotiations. So these journalists, the Financial Times journalists that leaked the information, broke the negotiations. See, so I completely agree with you. That can happen. I just gave you an example.
So I think at international level, you also have to be conscious of the elements that are beyond your control, and be prepared to create mitigating solutions.
Yes.
Actions for that.
Yes, I completely agree. And you have to have you have to control information.
Yes.
Very few people can get involved in the preliminary phases of the negotiation, because if information spreads, then it becomes very hard. The more people are involved at the beginning, the less you have control.
That's very true. No, thank you very much. And once again, we want to thank our participants and those who have asked questions and contributed. We thank you. And once again, Prof. Rana is available for any more questions. Please email us and we can push your questions to him. And if you want to discuss further discussions. So we just want to thank our speakers in this series of negotiation. We've learned a lot. And once again, E4Impact Foundation, the Catholic University of Milan, we are offering programs as well that you can come through. Our programs and components always have the negotiation aspect to it. So go to our social media, see what programs are available, and contact us. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.